Hey, I hope you enjoyed your milk and cookies or a bowl of ice cream, whatever I inspired you to get there at break time. So let's conclude our conversation on dairy cattle feeding here, hopefully, in segment 2. So I mentioned we would talk about grouping options, and the first one I want to hit on is early lactation and post-fresh groups. And here we're talking about lactating cows. So they've had their calf, 0 day, so the day that they calve up to 60 days in milk. So that first 2 months of lactation. Milk production is going to be increasing. I'm going to show you a graph here in a little bit that will help illustrate this a little bit. But milk production will be increasing, so we really want to encourage forage intake here. We want to feed a lot. We're going to need to feed a substantial amount of grain, but I say careful grain feeding because we don't want to get carried away here with grain feeding because of some of the metabolic problems that I mentioned in the first segment, like acidosis and especially displaced abomasum. Things like milk fever and ketosis can become problematic if we are really imbalanced in our ration or have poor dry matter intakes in this early lactation phase. So make your ration energy dense, typically with high crude protein feeding levels. Make sure that it's very, very palatable. We want cows to eat as freely as possible and have it taste as good as what we can. Cows will be naturally losing weight in this stage, and again that will pop up in the graph that we have here in a little bit. We just want to manage that weight loss and don't let it get to be too excessive. The next phase is what we call then peak milk. So here we're 60 to 140 days in milk. This is where they're going to hit their maximum dry matter intake levels. And we want to try and keep that pushing higher and higher because for every 1 pound of peak milk that we get, it equals about 300 pounds in lactation. So if we can take our peak milk production from 100 to 110 pounds at peak milk per cow, that would be 3,000 pounds more milk that she'll make over her lactation, provided that we support her nutritionally the whole time. So here we're going to talk about optimal forage feeding. We're probably going to be a fairly high rate of carbohydrates, moderately high crude protein, and it actually would be coming down from the first phase just a little bit, and definitely here balancing for amino acids. The next phase then would be late lactation, so here 140 plus days in milk all the way to the dry period whenever they complete their lactation and are no longer lactating. So we're going to increase forage concentration here in order to decrease costs. So instead of that 50-50 forage concentrate blend, we might be pushing it up towards 55, 58, 60, maybe a touch over just depending on how high our milk production is. Here we want to carefully manage our weight gain. Cows are going to be declining in production, so therefore not near as much energy need, probably pregnant, so we want to not let them get overly conditioned. So we want to manage weight gain utilizing more forage density at this point in time rather than carbohydrates. The dry off period, the dry period, especially in the far offs here, we're talking about the 3 weeks to about 60 days prior to calving. So they've just completed their lactation. We've got they're going to be dry for about 60 days, not lactating, given that vacation time, so to speak. So from day 60 all the way down to 21 days prior to calving, a really high forage to concentrate ratio. We're going to let them rest, so to speak. Utilize pasture if you've got access to it, but maintain body condition. We don't want any weight gain or weight loss in this period, very carefully. Minimal grain feeding just to keep a little protein and a little bit of energy into them as needed, and of course be able to supplement their mineral and vitamins. And we want to start dropping the calcium feeding levels so that we prevent milk fever problems, which is really a challenge for a lot of dairy producers at calving time. Then the dry period, and we'll call it the pre-fresh phase, so day 21 prior to calving all the way down to calving time, we're going to need to increase ration carbohydrate and crude protein density. These cows are going to start to not eat very much, and so we've got to put a lot of nutrients in a small package. Feeding mineral and vitamins carefully to prevent metabolic problems. And here again, I'm talking about milk fever, which is low blood calcium. Ketosis, which is high non-esterified fatty acids that come in at the time when they start mobilizing a lot of fat. Those are the main two that we have to focus on. If we minimize those, then we will have less issue with displaced abomasum. You see the letters DCAD there. That means dietary cation anion difference, and that is the blend or the balance of positive cations in the blood and negative cations. So a little blood chemistry going on here. We want to make that, we want to drive that pH lower in order to help them mobilize some of their own body mineral a little bit. Focus on palatability here. We need cows to eat. And then decrease stocking density. We want cows with plenty of space and plenty comfortable so that they will eat as much as possible. Maybe the last one here in terms of grouping strategies is a 2-year-old group. Our first lactation cows, because these girls are probably still growing to reach mature size. And, those big older cows will push them around a lot, prevent them from getting to the feed bunk. Bang and beat on them a little bit, just how the social structure works. So you'll actually get a higher response in milk production if you have a separate 2-year-old group and feed those a little bit differently. They'll need a little bit more energy density in their diet and crude protein density in order to support that coming growth. I mentioned referenced this chart a number of times. This is a busy chart. The red line at the top is milk production. So again, starts here in this example about 85 pounds of milk. She peaks at about week 8 at 98 pounds of milk and then kind of slowly tails off and dries off over here at about 44 weeks of lactation, milking about 46 pounds. The green line is milk butter fat. The black line is milk protein. You see that those start relatively high. They drop off and bottom out about just past peak milk and then kind of slowly rise as we get all the way to the dry period. The orange line is dry matter intake. So they start off eating about 24 pounds of dry matter, and they peak at about week 16 at 55 pounds of dry matter. So they will more than double their dry matter intake. The key thing in here is to compare the red line and the orange line. Is we have peak dry matter intake 8 weeks past when we had peak milk intake. It's basically impossible to get those things to match. But the result of that gap in there is the blue line, where we have body weight loss. And we want to kind of get that to stop around week 10 because we kind of like to get cows pregnant, number one, and we start to have some, if this line continues to go down, continues to plummet, we have some really bad metabolic problems developing. So that's kind of what this chart means. I'm sure we'll discuss it more in the classroom. So some final considerations as we talk about feeding lactating dairy cows. Manage feed particle size. We don't want the feed to get too fine because even the forages we can get too fine and cause real big problems. Feed hay. Feed it hay that's good quality. We want really good quality hay. I've mentioned a number of other species when we talk hay about moderating it, mostly grass hay, and don't get too expensive. Here's where you need to feed good quality hay and good quality alfalfa hay primarily. Lots and lots of clean, fresh water. This is a huge pet peeve of mine. I like clean, fresh water. Keep your waters clean. Cows will get a lot of stuff in them, whether it's feed particles or manure or whatever. They're good places to play. They stand in them. Clean them out. We need about 3 to 5 pounds of water consumption per pound of milk per day. So 30 to 50 gallons is what milk cows need. Add fat in the ration. That helps make it more energy dense. We've talked about that before. And utilize buffers. That will help with our rumen pH issues. A couple of slides to go here, and let's transition. We're not going to probably do it enough justice, but you'll get the idea. With feeding replacements, first we've got to start with colostrum. 2+ quarts within the first 30 minutes to 1 hour. That will get that calf really going nutritionally. Otherwise, she's going to lose all of her body reserves, and we need antibody transfer. So colostrum from mama as soon as possible, and even if you can get more than 2 quarts, great. After that, she's going to need about 2 quarts morning, 2 quarts night, and I've played around with even 3 times a day feeding, where you're getting up to 2 quarts each, feeding 3 times, and that really makes calves grow. They do really well. Milk replacers, if you're going to use milk replacer, which I highly suggest. It's a completely balanced ration each and every time you feed if you do it correctly. Use high quality stuff. Here's where I would not promote using the cheapest thing you can find. It's worth it to feed the high quality milk replacer. Use something that's medicated and accelerated, so high crude protein, high fat density, so that you get accelerated growth. There's tons and tons of studies out there focused on feeding baby calves that if we do a great job early on in that birth to say 300 pounds stage, we're talking a payoff of about 2,000 to 3,000 pounds more milk in the first lactation. Calf starters are going to be steam flaked corn, some oats, some pellets, some molasses, mineral vitamin. It's great quality feed. It smells delicious. But those, again, here, feed great quality calf starter. And I'm talking about to the high end of the range, 18 to 24% crude protein. Again, probably medicated. And then get these calves weaned as early as you can to reduce cost. And current data says wean calves when they're eating a pound of grain per day for 3 days straight. And that might be at day 40 or 45 sometimes. We used to feed calves and wean them at day 60 or day 90. Today's data says we can wean them much sooner, and lots of times with very little to no hay. Grain is really what develops the rumen. All right, our heifers then, as we go through our life cycle program, from 4 to 12 months, just enough supplemental grain to support growth, good quality forage. You need decent quality stuff here. Feed an ionophore. That rumensin that we talked about earlier is pretty critical here. Avoid high body condition scores, so don't get them fat in that 4 months to yearling stage, because they will deposit a lot of fat in the mammary area as it develops, and that will decrease milk production in the first lactation. Plus, once you get calves fat, it's hard to thin them down. Heifers that are 12 months and older up to their first calving, here we're going to really push forage feeding and forage density and probably high fiber forages. Just enough grain as appropriate to support growth and deliver their minerals and vitamins. We need them to breeding weight at about 12 to 15 months of age. So for Jersey cows, that's about 500 or 600 pounds. For Holsteins, that's about 700 to 800 pounds. So that way we have heifers calving for the first time somewhere between even 19 up to 24 months of age. So again, don't get these calves and heifers fat. And here we can use straw if needed in order to make the diet a lot less energy dense, in order to provide them a lot more fiber. So your take-home messages. Again, I'm a fan of great forages. Got to say it again. Match your nutrition to your production goals. Optimum feeding levels is really the key here. 50-50 forage concentrate ratio. Got to keep that one in the back of your mind. And then again, monitor body condition score and replacements. And I should substitute replacements for all cattle, like all life cycle phases of dairy cattle. Body condition tells you a lot. So that wraps up Unit 9. I'll look forward to a good, rigorous discussion and hopefully a fun experience balancing rations for our dairy cattle.